This is Ryan.
This is Sean.
And this is Jordan.
Welcome to the HackMyStuff.com podcast, episode 5. In FTA news, the new ViewSat Pro has come out. Not a whole lot known about it right now, with the exception of no one I know is running it. The specs were recently released from viewsatusa.com. Basically, what you're getting at approximately $279 Canadian is a version of a PVR. It's a single tuner machine with PVR functionality. The DVR portion of the machine, however, there is no internal hard drive. It is hooked up through USB. So I made some phone calls. I actually talked to one of the distributors, and they were telling me that it doesn't matter what speed the drive is, as long as it's in an external enclosure and then connected through USB. So I'm assuming a standard 7200 RPM drive will suffice, and then regardless of what size, whether you want to throw in a 120 or a 350 or whatever. But that's essentially what it is. Standard ViewSat machine with the PVR functionality at a lower price, unlike their actual DVR machine that has two tuners. The advantage, of course, of a two-tuning machine is you can be recording something on one channel and watching something on another, whereas with a single tuner, of course, you have to be watching whatever you're recording. Pretty standard, but at $279 Canadian, good price, looks like a good machine. I mean, it's a ViewSat product. It's going to be probably rock solid. As soon as bins start coming out for it, I will post them on the site, but this is a brand new machine. I think it's been available retail for less than a week at this point anyway, so who knows, maybe I'll even save up my pennies and pick one up myself. Additionally, with 360 News, the version of iExtreme, the 1.2B version, is now available, finally, for us people who use the Hitachi LG drives and can reflash our drives, allowing you to get back on Xbox Live, which is really cool. I haven't had a chance to try it myself. From everything I understand, gone are the days of the original, after the Halo 3 beta came out and the firmware updates, and people had to phone Microsoft and shake their fists and get them to rescan their machines. Apparently, with the 1.2 update, you can actually just flash your machine and it stealths it right out of the gate so that you're good to go. You can basically, as soon as you have it flashed, put everything back together and you're back on Xbox Live. This, of course, is unsubstantiated. I haven't had a chance to try it myself. Maybe as soon as today or tomorrow I might give it a crack if I can find some time here, and of course I will report any news on that once I try it out myself. Today's podcast is basically going to be devoted to the E3 show and all the announcements made at E3. So we're going to cover the big three press conferences from Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, probably consecutively, and go from there. We're going to talk about all the announcements that were made in terms of gaming consoles, and of course with Microsoft Games for Windows. We are going to be skipping over the what you've been playing section this week. We're trying to hammer out a podcast real quick here, and with all the announcements and things like that, we could spend theoretically hours talking about all the developments and things coming out.
Easy.
So let's start with again, E3 press only this year. First time in 11 years.
And how restrictive are they being on that? Because press on the last, the reason it got out of hand is because press started to include owners of fan sites, anybody to do anything with a magazine. I mean, it really was. I mean, you could be press just because, hey, I know 10 people. From
what I understand, and maybe you guys heard differently, Jordan, you're kind of in touch with a little bit more in the media base than myself or Sean.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, it was invite only. Is that what you've heard?
Yeah, you had to receive an invite, and I think there's not so many fan sites. Like you could even tell, especially at the press conferences, when a big announcement would be made or a big game would be shown. If you heard a cheer, that was them roaring, because if you heard anything,
Well, with the exception of
the
press conferences themselves, E3 this year didn't take place in a single venue.
Really?
Unlike years gone past. No, it was spread over 14 hotels.
Spread over Santa Monica.
And conference rooms. And that's actually one of the complaints that a lot of publishers and things, like the magazine publishers and stuff that were invited, had issue with, because if you're a small company and you literally had to make up schedules, and there was some companies, like big companies, that couldn't attend all the events. They basically had to choose between, okay, well, are we going to go to the EA presentation or are we going to go to this, because they're both on at the same time and we don't have enough staff to cover all these events. So what do we want to cover? So I know that with that being said, a lot of it's one of those good bad things, I guess. Going into it, a lot of publications were saying that it was just dumb and that it wasn't going to work, and that they really despised the idea of having to run around all over town to make these meetings. Once the smoke cleared, quite a few people actually said that it worked a lot better for them once they attended these things, because they could talk directly to the developers of the game. They could play the games. They didn't have to wait an hour, in lineups for hours and hours on end to play a 15-minute demo of a game. They could hear what the developers were saying. You weren't fighting for any sort of leverage, over some other publication on asking questions and things. It was done on a one-on-one basis. Now, that being said, I've also heard rumors that next year they're already talking about going back to the old format, which baffles me. I mean, they got away from that for a reason. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
It's going to be what the publishers want, because a show like that is always paid for by the publishers. And I guess what it's going to come down to is if the publishers are willing to pay for a bigger venue again.
Well, apparently one of the reasons the smaller companies didn't go, because usually they had something like Kensha Hall, and now to pay for this small little hotel room, it was like, I can't remember how much it was. I think it was like $25,000 or something. It was a ridiculous amount for this hotel room for 3 days that they wanted to pay for it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, with E for All coming up in the fall, I think it's in August.
Yeah.
The E for All, which is a public showing. It's basically what E3 used to be. And I'm sure there will be the smaller vendors and things like that, whether it's hardware vendors or smaller distributors, with the equivalent of the Kensha Halls. And there will be, I mean, of course, EA is going to represent there, and Blizzard and Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo. Represent. But let's cover some of the actual announcements. And the first out of the gates was Microsoft, who all three news conferences were webcast. As far as I know, Microsoft was the only one that broadcast theirs live on television as well.
Was it on G4 or something?
It was on G4. That's actually where I watched it.
That was probably the only gaming programming on that station the entire day, I'd guess.
No, I mean, everybody's reporting the same thing. I watched it, and it was there wasn't really much that we didn't already know, unlike years past where they were talking. Last year Nintendo unveiled the Wii, and I shouldn't say unveiled it. You had seen it before, but it was playable for the first time. PlayStation 3 was playable for the first time last year. This year with Microsoft, really no big announcements. They kept it pretty safe.
Sega games on Xbox Live Arcade. Woo!
The one thing that did make me kind of question what was going on there is, and it's sort of an after-fact thing, is they announced an exclusive deal with Disney for downloadable content on their over Xbox Live.
And in a related subject, they also announced that this fall they're going to have Europe and Canada finally be able to download those videos.
Exactly. Now, the crazy thing for me is Disney also has an exclusive for
Blu-ray?
disc media. They're exclusively like on next gen content in terms of HD DVD or Blu-ray. They are exclusively Blu-ray.
You got to realize that Microsoft doesn't. Okay, I'm going to do the air quotes here. They back HD DVD, but only because Sony. They don't actually have anything really invested in HD DVD, as far as I know. They're just doing it because
You mean Blu-ray?
No, they don't back.
Microsoft doesn't. Back